Hey guys, I've been Challenger since set 3. There was a C patch, so just wanted to give you guys an updated guide on how to climb in this meta. It's now at a heavier AD meta. The AP comps that were good previously really struggle taking down like the Tryndamere, the Tahm Kench, the Baron comps. They just don't have enough single target DPS, and that's why the AD comps shine. Right now, if you play towards like Annie and you don't hit, you just get Giga farmed by the Diana boards because they just insta-kill your backline and you have no damage. Because it's a heavier AD meta, Skarner is actually like probably one of the most broken units in the meta right now. So if you could ever play towards just playing a random Skarner on your board and itemizing him, he actually like 1v9 tanks their entire backline. You're slightly less encouraged to fast 9. You actually do have to be somewhat stable at 8. You could slight roll at 8, but you do need to like find some board in some way to get to 9. But the latest comps that you now want to play towards are Fast 9 Ionia. There are a couple of variants you want to play towards that include Ryze Skarner, which I'll go into. Demacia, really strong top 4 comp. Volibear Ryze, you generally want to angle towards this if you play around like an AP carry early, because you end up playing around Volibear, which is super stable at level 8, Reroll Tryndamere, and Diana. Diana was previously good in my last video, but there is actually an updated way to play this comp now. It involves playing around Bard early game, full opening, and then all ending on 3-5, which I will go into later. These 3 comps are still good, but the playstyle is generally the same. If you want more information on this, just reference my old video. I will not touch on these 3 comps in this video. In the tier list, Bilgewater, Ionia Fast 9, Diana, S tier, and then all of these are going to be in the A tier. And we'll jump right into the comp. So the first S tier comp is going to be Ionia Fast 9. This comp is really good because you usually only play around Ionia if it's the EXP or the gold one. So the extra resources allow you to get to 9 quite easily, and the units that you could play at 9 are very good, and the board that stabilizes you at level 8 are pretty cheap and easy to get because you have easy access to set. So there are only 2 main variations you need to know. This is the Skarner board. This is the board that the rank 2 guy always plays towards. He goes like 1-1-1-1 with this exact board. And the other variation is going to be around Ryze. The distinction between whether to play this one and the other one, I think, really depends on your items and your early game. So if you already have the Yordles unlocked and you have AP items, you can play towards this. Or if you play like a Yordle early mid game, you could also play towards this. Generally, this comp is like you need to get to 9 to play around Ryze to have a high cap. Otherwise, a lot of the times the max you get is a 4th. So you would need to keep that in mind. This version you could play towards if you don't have Yordles unlocked, don't have AP items, and you slight roll at 8 and are able to get to 9. So what I mean by slight roll is like, you don't want to roll too deep to 2-star your entire board because your game plan is to get to 9 and play around like all of these units to cap your board. So your roll down at 4-2, you probably only want to roll for like 10 or 20 gold, and your core units you want to roll for are going to be these 7. Generally, if it's the EXP Ionia, feel free to play like 7 Ionia because you get 40 XP a turn. But if it's the gold Ionia, you generally want to slight roll and play some variant with like 5 Ionia early. And you would flex the other 2 slots. So for example, if you hit like a random Senna, then you would probably like drop Ari and play around like Jin Senna. If you hit like a random 2-star Loris, you consider playing around like the Sinzhao Loris duo. If you hit like 4 Bruiser, that's also an option. 4 Bruiser frontline, 5 Ionia. Couple of options you could do, but your goal is to like spend the least amount of gold possible to stabilize at level 8 with the intention to go 9 to cap out your board with Skarner. Another thing I noticed in this guy's match history is that the unlock condition for Skarner is you need to slam 8 gargoyles, but this guy doesn't have any gargoyles on any of his units. So that leads me to believe that he either slams the TG and hopes he gets the gargoyles from the TG and unlocks Skarner that way, or he only plays this variant if he has a Reforger, because gargoyles is generally a pretty shit item. He probably slams a gargoyle, unlocks a Skarner, and then reforges it into a random one. That's my guess. But this is like a very, very high cap level 9 AD board because Skarner just 1v9s their entire backline. He does best in like one of these corners, and he's really like an AP, or he's like a caster tank. You want him to take damage and generate mana, and then he basically CCs their entire side. If you don't hit the Skarner, this is also like a variation you could play. It's just you play 2 Jugs instead, and you get 2 Arcanists with Ari and Swain. If you have any leftover AP items, just put them on the set. Diana is still S tier, but her playstyle in the early and mid game has completely changed. Basically, your game plan is to play around Bard early game. And the reason why Bard is good is because to unlock Diana, you need Leona 2. Bard gives you 1 reroll a turn if you lose. So if you're planning to lose streak anyway, you have like 9 free rerolls prepped up for stage 3-5, and it greatly increases the chances of you unlocking the Diana at that point. So this comp is S tier because you could actually play this comp from any spot. And it's still pretty consistent because you're almost guaranteed to hit the Diana 1. Your game plan is going to be you first identify if you want to play this comp at all. So the situations that I would play this comp is like if you have no upgraded units or like you have no item slam. Let's say you have like a chain and a bow and you don't have a third component. Probably can't slam that. You're probably not going to win streak. I would just full open and then roll for Bard. So you roll for a Bard at stage 2-3 4 times, and the units you want to look for are going to be Jarvans. This is important because you're prepping for the Silas in the late game, and you could also look for the Ishtal units as well. If your game plan is to lost streak until stage 3-5, if you get a lost streak quest, it's basically free resources to prep for your 3-5 roll down. At stage 3-5, there are a couple of different units that you want to be looking to pick up. Basically, any of these units that aren't legendaries are good. They stabilize your board. Ambessa is here because you have the opportunity to play around Mel if you don't hit like the Azir. Lux Garen's also here. Sometimes you do hit like the random Lux 2 and Garen 2 here, and it gets you like the Silas. And any of these legendaries are also quite good as well. Your goal is to just hit like a couple of 2-star units because you already lost so much HP by stage 3-5. You're going to be like 40 HP. You don't want to lose a single round until stage 4 or 5, which is going to be your next spike. Usually, if you hit like a 2-star Zoe, 2-star Leona, 2-star Sedge, or whatever, and a perfect 1-star copy of Diana, and you have perfect items because you have Carousel Prior because you sacked, you're usually stable and you win every round until stage 4 or 5. And if you feel like you're strong, you could also keep the Barden to generate you some extra resources to prep for the 4 or 5 roll down. So 3-5, you all in. Hopefully you hit the Leona. You hopefully win until stage 4 or 5, and then you all in again to 2-star your board. And the 2 variants you want to play towards is going to be this one. This is the default like max cap variant. And then if you hit the Ambessa, you could also consider playing around the Mel instead. Like let's say you missed the Azir, perfectly fine as well. The good thing about this comp is that you're stable off Diana 1, assuming you have Biss, which you will because you're sacking. And this gives you the time to get to 8 to hit your board. It's really, really strong comp to play from any shitty spot. Highly recommend like playing towards this comp with Bard in the early game instead. Another comp that has popped up that fills in the bruiser tree is actually around Volibear and Ryze. It is a little tricky to play though because it requires you to unlock Kennen and Kabuko. You can play towards this comp if you're playing around like the Yordle early and mid game, but typically it's not as good because you do not have like the Volibear items, because typically you're slamming like tank items for your Wukong and like AD/AP items on your Teemo and Tristana. So you actually have to play towards this comp preferably from like an AP opener. So like for example, something like this. And then this comp really likes belts. You would streak around like the Anivia, and then you would hold all the Yordles and the Ionias to prep for the unlock for Kennen and Kabuko, because you do need these 2 units to unlock Volibear. Basically, your game plan is to just save HP early game. You want to look for belts on Carousel, and assuming you already have AP items, Zoe, Ahri, Anivia, all really good early game item holders. And then at stage 3-7, the minion round, you want to unlock Kennen. So you want to hold all the Yordles, defenders, and whatever. Once you unlock Kennen, it becomes way easier to unlock Kabuko in your next round. So you unlock Kabuko at 4-1, and then at 4-2 during your roll down, you should have all of these units unlocked, and you want to roll for 4 Bruiser and a 2-star copy of Kabuko. The 2-star copy of Kabuko is super important because it makes it super easy to unlock the Volibear at stage 4-2. You just need 2 HP items. Obviously, if you just have a Styrax or a Warmogs, it's an easy unlock, but sometimes you don't actually have the luxury of slamming the Warmogs because you need a lot of belts for this comp. So like, for example, you need Anti-Heal, that's already 1 belt, and you need Styrax, which is like another belt. And then Visage is also like another very good like tank item. So one easy way that you could unlock Kabuko if you don't have Warmogs is this and this. You don't need Warmogs here, you only need 2 belts, but this gives you anti-heal, and this gives you one of the core items on your Volibear. Your goal is to only slight roll at 8. That's one of the strengths of this comp. You're stable without rolling too deep, and you're stable off, honestly, just a Kabuko 2, List 1, Volley 1, and then you could go 9. Because at 9, your game plan is to play around the Ryze. Where is this dude? Ryze is what caps out like this board, and it is actually only one of the only boards that has access to Ryze. I don't know why this is not opening up. But basically, you slight roll at 8. Hopefully, you have triple item lists, triple item Volibear. And then you could usually sack, like you probably lose like 1 or 2 rounds, but Volibear will win you some rounds. Go 9, play Ryze, and then you cap out with this board. And it is a very, very strong board. It is probably one of the only AP boards that you could play around normally without going fast 9. And it is also a comp that makes use around a lot of the bruiser items, which is very, very good. Demacia, super solid top 4 comp. You could basically play this comp anytime you get like a Vayne drop in the early game. Demacia has a very strong early game if you get a Vayne, just because you're guaranteed to hit 3 Demacia. Because Poppy is unlocked from just stacking 2 items on any Yordle or any Demacia unit, which is basically guaranteed. And you could just have a very safe early and mid game. The standard level 8 board is going to be this. You position like this because the enemy board wraps around the Garen, and then Lux gets some Giga Juicer ults on their entire team, and it basically clears them. Lux likes 1 mana item and 2 damage, and then you just stack all your tank items on your Garen. If you find the Ornn, you play the Ornn. Otherwise, you just play some random shitter that you find. And you put all of your leftover items on your Galio and your Vayne. Additionally, you could also play the Reroll Vayne variant, which is actually, in my opinion, quite strong. I think stronger than this one, has higher cap. Basically, your game plan is to slow roll at level 7. And you basically play around 3-star Vayne. I think you also have the opportunity to play around 3-star Loris. I've seen some high elo players do this, but you don't have to go for the Loris if you're too poor. Honestly, just hitting 3-star Vayne is enough. But Loris and Caitlyn are pretty nice because it fills in the traits quite nicely. You get 2 Piltover if the Piltover is good, and also gives you 2 long shot. But if you don't hit the Loris, just playing like some other random unit is fine, and then you just go 8 and then play into the same board, except you just play like a second long shot. That's pretty much it. Itemization, just check Meta TFT or the Google Doc that I linked in the comments. Another comp that's really good right now is going to be Reroll Tryndamere. Tryndamere is really solid at dealing with the super tanky individual units. He just has so much raw damage that he basically just insta-kills them and then runs to their backline and wipes their entire team. There are 2 main situations you want to play Tryndamere. The first one is if you get an artifact for Tryndamere. So like just for example, I'm going to go on Meta TFT. If you look at any of these item combinations, all of them involve an artifact, and the delta change on it is insane. So at any time in the early game, if you get like any of these artifacts or like a darken item, you look towards playing Tryndamere. Other scenarios that you could play it is like if you don't have an artifact. Let's say you have like Stars Are Born, you get the insta-free Tryndamere, and you have like a slammable item. You could probably play towards Tryndamere and get like a safe top 4. Basically, in the early game, you really do want to win because Tryndamere and Ashe get stronger as you kill units with them. So the stacks you get in the early game enable you to win the fights in the mid game, which will enable you to win the fights in the late game. So like it's very, very, very it's a very snowball-y comp, if that makes sense. Basically, your game plan, hopefully you get an Ashe. If you get a Sedge, that's like the Gigabyss opener. You just slam 2 items on Ashe, unlock the Tryndamere, play a strong early game, try to kill units, and then you just try to snowball off like the early game unit stacks that you get. One quick tip is like at level 6, you don't have access to the 7th slot, so you can't really play around the Swain. And Swain is also kind of hard to hit at 6. So generally, I found it better to play around the Darius at level 6. It fits your traits nicely, and it makes your tank. You're reasonably. It's reasonable to hit the Darius 2, as opposed to like a Swain 1. When you still roll for like Tryndamere. So this is at like a very solid front line, and it lets you get like the stacks that Tryndamere and Ashe needs, as you look for like the Nico 3 or like the Nico 2 or Swain. Once you 3-star like your Tryndamere and your Ashe. Then you can push levels, go 7, and you can remove the Darius, and then play around like this variant where you get to play around Swain instead. Itemization wise, I think if you have like when you think about itemizing either your Tryndamere or Ashe, They use kind of like similar items, except Tryndamere needs QSS, but you want to itemize your units in a way that kills the most units possible in the early game. So like that could mean like different things. So like for example, if you already have like a solid front line and you have like a 2-star Tryndamere, then maybe you should itemize like the Tryndamere instead because he's like a giga beast. But if you have like a 1-star front line, probably better to just itemize the Ashe because it'll get you more stacks in the long run. It also depends on like your item economy as well. Like if you don't have like a QSS, it's probably better to just like full stack the Ashe because your Tryndamere is just gonna die or get CC'd. But pretty strong comp. It's really an artifact check for like going first, but another safe top 4 if you just have like a strong standard early game opener. So that sums up my guide for patch 16.1c. For these 3 comps, they're still very good, but I did not include this in this video because I covered them in my last one. So if you want to know how to play them, just check out my previous video. If you enjoyed this video, would really appreciate the sub on YouTube or the follow on Twitch, and I'll see you guys in the next patch.